"You can't possibly afford this lifestyle," my brother mocked. Just then, the host called my name. "Welcome back, Mr. Lane. Your private suite is ready." My father's smile faded, and I knew the tables had turned forever. "Hey everyone, I'm Marcus, 40M, and I didn't expect to be writing something like this, but I think it's finally time to share what happened. Maybe someone out there will see a bit of themselves in this story. Maybe it'll just be a reminder that quiet progress can be more powerful than loud approval. Either way, buckle up. This one's been simmering for years. I'll start with the basics. I come from a family that takes appearances seriously. Not the kind of family that goes on vacations together or plays board games on weekends. More the kind that attends galas, takes posed photos in coordinated outfits, and uses words like legacy in everyday conversation. We were expected to present well, speak with polish, and, above all, keep emotions where they belonged, locked away. My father, Ronald Lane, 68M, is a textbook example of control dressed up as professionalism. He built Lane Dynamics, a corporate consulting firm, from the ground up and reminded us of it at every birthday, holiday, and dinner table conversation. My mother, Catherine, passed away when I was 17. I wish I could say that brought the family closer, but the truth is, her absence made everything colder. She was the buffer. After she was gone, Dad didn't soften, he streamlined. Then there's my younger brother, Brennan, 37M. Charming, confident, sharp dresser. Always said the right thing at the right time. If my father was the CEO, Brennan was the golden heir. The one who'd been learning the business since middle school, tagging along to meetings, mimicking Dad's mannerisms, being praised for thinking strategically when he asked if I could just stay home during family events. Growing up, I was different, quiet. I liked puzzles, machines, art, and silence. While Brennan got accolades for leading school clubs and winning debate tournaments, I was happiest with a sketchpad or disassembling a broken coffee maker just to see how it worked. Dad didn't get that. To him, hobbies were distractions, and distractions had no place in a Lane man's future. After college, which I paid for largely through scholarships and part-time jobs because Dad thought I needed to learn to value money, I pitched him a small tech product I'd been developing. It was a modular device designed to integrate home systems, security, temperature, lighting through adaptive AI. It wasn't revolutionary, but it had potential. I was proud of it. Dad listened, nodded, and then told me it was not aligned with the Lane brand. He suggested I look into joining Brennan's team at the company, something involving data reporting and market analysis. I politely declined. That was the first fracture, a quiet one, but it widened over time. Brennan, of course, was thriving. Or so he said. He got married to a woman named Haley, the kind of person who makes you feel judged just by blinking. Their wedding had ice sculptures, a harpist, and a guest list that read like a stock portfolio. I wasn't in the wedding party. I was seated next to the coat check. Literally. Still, I kept in touch. I wasn't cut off. I just wasn't considered part of the core narrative. They'd send group texts about family dinners I was expected to attend, but never consulted about. Brennan would post polished photos of work trips to Europe and team retreats at ski resorts. Dad would share them with captions like, "Proud of this one. Future's in good hands." Meanwhile, I worked out of a cramped apartment above a bakery, building custom software tools for small businesses. I kept my head down, said little, and reinvested everything into what became my company. No investors, no handouts, no shiny PR. Just grit, long hours, and a vision. Over the years, it grew, slowly, then all at once. By my mid-30s, I had a small team, several patents, and contracts in multiple countries. But I never told my family the full extent of it. Not out of secrecy, but because, well, they never really asked. Which brings us to last year, the year everything shifted. My dad turned 67 and decided to celebrate with what he called his legacy retreat, a weekend-long event at a luxury resort in the mountains. The goal, he said, was to reflect on the past and cement the future. I got the invitation late, not lost in the mail, just forgotten, according to Haley's sheepish follow-up email. The message felt rehearsed. I almost didn't go, but something in me, not spite, not anger, just a quiet sense of self, said, "No, go, show up." The resort was the kind you see in glossy travel magazines. Stone archways, snow-dusted balconies, hot springs nestled in pine groves. The kind of place you only see from a distance, unless you're someone like my dad, or someone he approves of. I pulled up in my Jaguar. Not flashy new. A vintage XJ I restored with my own hands. It wasn't about showing off. It was about showing up with something I had built. Brennan was already there, standing near the valet with Haley, wearing a tailored coat and sunglasses even though the sun was already dipping. He saw my car and raised an eyebrow. Didn't know they let classics in here, he smirked. Didn't know they let rentals in either, I replied calmly. Just then, the valet stepped forward, looked at me, and said, Mr. Lane, welcome back. We've prepared your suite just as you requested. Brennan blinked. Haley's expression froze just a second too long. Back? My father asked, stepping out from the lobby. He looked at the valet, then at me. I've stayed here a few times, I said simply. It's a good place for planning. Dad nodded, but I saw it, the flicker of confusion, of recalibration. Dinner that night was exactly what I expected. Brennan gave a speech about Lane legacy, using phrases like expansion strategy and carrying the torch. My father clapped, full of pride. Then came the moment, the question directed at me, casual, cutting. So, Marcus, Dad said, refilling his glass of sparkling water, you're still working on that little gadget thing of yours? I looked up, met his eyes, and said, actually, we've expanded. Opened a Zurich office last month. Asia's next. Brennan chuckled, that low, dismissive sound I'd heard since we were kids. Zurich, he repeated. Come on, man. You can't possibly afford that lifestyle. And then, like it had been rehearsed, the host stepped forward from the side of the dining room and addressed me directly. Mr. Lane, he said, with a slight bow. Your suite is ready whenever you'd like. We've stocked it with your usual preferences. There was a pause. Not long. Just enough. My father's smile faltered. Brennan's hand tightened around his fork. Haley glanced at him, then back at me, her expression unreadable. I stood slowly, nodded at the host, and said, thank you. I'll head up soon. And with that, I left them at the table. But that was only the beginning. Because the next morning, during the so-called family legacy brunch, Brennan made a move so smug, so calculated, he didn't realize he was lighting a match beside a pile of dry leaves. He thought he had the upper hand. He thought he was the only one who'd come prepared. When I walked into the dining hall the next morning, the same hostess from the night before greeted me by name and offered me my preferred tea. A quiet detail that didn't go unnoticed by the rest of my family, seated near the large picture window overlooking the forested valley. They were already mid-conversation when I approached. My father sat at the head of the table, flanked by Brennan and Haley on his right. To his left were two board members from Lane Dynamics. Men I remembered from childhood gatherings where I was expected to be seen, not heard. Across from them sat Aunt Charlene, politely sipping her coffee and keeping her face pleasantly neutral, though I knew her well enough to catch the brief look of amusement in her eyes when she saw me. Good morning, I said calmly, settling into the seat furthest from Brennan. My tea was placed before me moments later, black Assam, no sugar, just as I liked. Sleep well? Brennan asked, voice light but eyes sharp. Very, I replied. My father gave me a measured look. I hear you've been keeping busy. Zurich, was it? I nodded. That's right. It's a small office for now, but growing. We're working on an interface system for energy-efficient buildings. Government contracts. Long road, but promising. Haley blinked once, then offered a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. That sounds niche. It's not exactly a hobby anymore, I replied gently. Brennan let out a soft laugh, shaking his head. Marcus, you've always been the dreamer, huh? That word, dreamer. In our family, that was never a compliment. It was a polite way of saying unfocused, unrealistic, unserious. The board members leaned in slightly. One of them, Mr. Keaton, I think, asked, what's the name of your company again? Before I could respond, Brennan cut in. It's small. Marcus runs a boutique tech thing. Niche stuff, like he said. Custom installations for clients who like gadgets. Very hands-on. I smiled politely. That's not quite accurate. We license proprietary systems now, including one in use at this resort, actually. I worked with the architect last year to integrate our adaptive climate tech. Mr. Keaton's eyebrows lifted. Really? That's impressive. Brennan's smile faltered for just a second. My father set his fork down. Technology is always evolving, he said neutrally. But infrastructure, that's where real legacy is built. Brennan's team just landed a multi-year consulting deal with Apex Corporation, a full systems overhaul, which they'll probably abandon halfway through. I muttered before I could stop myself. All eyes turned to me. Brennan sat up straighter. Excuse me. I sipped my tea, slow and steady. Apex has a reputation. They're known for cycling through firms and shelving plans. They've done it 3 times in 6 years. Might want to double-check the fine print. My father's face stiffened. And where did you hear that? I read, I said simply. And I've dealt with their procurement director. They wanted to white-label one of our systems last year. We declined. Brennan's nostrils flared. Of course you did. You always think you know better than everyone else. There it was, that familiar accusation, dressed in sibling rivalry but rooted in something deeper. Something that had been growing for decades. I don't think I know better, I said. I just pay attention. My father looked between us, irritation creeping into the set of his jaw. This isn't the place. But Brennan wasn't finished. He stood, slowly, the napkin falling from his lap. You know what, Dad? I've been patient. I've let him sit at this table, take credit for things he had no part in, talk like he's built something comparable. But this little show of his has gone on long enough. Haley placed a calming hand on his arm, but he shrugged it off. Marcus, Brennan said, voice cool now, performative, like he was giving a TED talk. We invited you here out of respect. Family respect. But let's not pretend you've earned the same seat. You don't understand how this world works. You've never been part of the real planning, the legacy discussions, the actual decision-making. You pop in with your restored car and your private suite like it means something. But we know what's behind it. I leaned back, watching him. And what's behind it? Debt, he said smugly. Short bursts of cash. Maybe a loan. Or a one-off contract. But we both know it's not sustainable. You can't possibly afford this lifestyle long-term. The room fell silent. Mr. Keaton cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. My father said nothing, just watched me. I stood slowly, folded my napkin, and set it on the table. I was hoping this weekend could be civil, I said. But if we're airing things out, fine. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a sleek card wallet, and slid a small white envelope across the table to my father. He stared at it. It's a summary, I said, of a buyout offer. From 3 weeks ago, a firm in Geneva wants to acquire my company. Full absorption, including patents, licensing, and our 2 European subsidiaries. Brennan scoffed. What? Someone wants to buy your toolkit. I didn't answer him. I just kept looking at my father. I turned them down, I continued. But they offered $48 million. The sound that came next was almost imperceptible. A sharp inhale from Aunt Charlene, and the quiet clink of Brennan's knife falling onto his plate. You're lying, Brennan said, too quickly. You can call the number in the envelope and ask. It's all there. Legal reviewed it. I was considering it, still am, to be honest. Zurich would make things easier logistically. My father opened the envelope. His eyes scanned the document inside. Of course, I added. I'd never expect you to be impressed. After all, it's not lane dynamics. I left the table then, not storming off, not triumphant. Just done. But that wasn't the end. Because what Brennan did next, that afternoon, during the scheduled Vision for the Future presentation, wasn't just petty. It was calculated. Mean. The kind of move you make when you think someone has finally outshined you and you're desperate to claw the spotlight back. The Vision for the Future presentation was the centerpiece of the weekend. The moment my father had carefully curated to unveil what he called the next chapter of Lane Legacy. It was scheduled for 3 p.m. in the resort's glass-walled summit room, perched high above the valley with sweeping views meant to symbolize foresight, ambition, clarity. The symbolism wasn't lost on me, or on Brennan. He had been rehearsing this moment since we were teenagers. It wasn't just about showing he could lead the company. It was about being publicly crowned as the heir, the one who carried not just the Lane name, but its entire empire. After the brunch confrontation, the air had shifted. Dad didn't say much afterward, and Brennan? He didn't look at me once as we passed in the hallway. But I noticed how tense his shoulders had become. The easy swagger he usually carried had stiffened into something more rigid, like a statue pretending to be alive. At 10 minutes to 3, I entered the summit room. The place was dressed up like a corporate retreat. White leather chairs, silver coffee urns, fruit trays carved into towers. Every person there had a branded folder with Lane Dynamics. Tomorrow begins today, embossed on the front. My folder was missing from the registration table. No surprise there. I took a seat in the second row, close enough to see clearly, far enough not to seem presumptuous. Aunt Charlene sat beside me. She didn't say anything, just gave me that calm, knowing look she always had, like she'd already seen how it would all play out. Brennan took the front stage like he owned it. He wore a navy blazer and a white shirt, no tie, that casual but authoritative look he always tried to pull off. Haley sat to the side, flipping through her phone like none of this was new to her. "Thank you all for being here," Brennan began, voice smooth, rehearsed. "It's an honor to stand here today, not just as a representative of Lane Dynamics, but as a son proud to carry his father's legacy forward." The room applauded politely. I leaned back, watching, letting him have his moment. Not because he deserved it, but because I had something he didn't. Patience. Brennan launched into his presentation. He talked about projected growth, about market strategies, about global expansion. He flashed charts and buzzwords and pictures of shiny buildings and cities he'd never stepped foot in. Then, right when I thought we were heading toward the end, his tone shifted. "There is, of course, another Lane among us," he said, turning slightly toward the audience, though not toward me. "My brother, Marcus." Heads turned. My heart stayed steady. "Marcus has always marched to the beat of his own drum," Brennan continued, smiling just enough for it to seem polite. "He's innovative, no question, creative, too. And we've all heard about his recent work in Zurich and beyond. But I think it's important to be transparent, especially when it comes to legacy." He paused, clicking to a new slide. A screenshot appeared. A website. Mine. Or what looked like mine. Only it wasn't. It was a shadow copy, an outdated domain I'd abandoned years ago before launching my current brand. The version Brennan showed still had my old logo, clunky UI, and a testimonial from a client I hadn't worked with in nearly 6 years. "Lane Dynamics prides itself on clarity," Brennan said, turning to the screen. "And in the spirit of clarity, I thought it was important to show where this tech empire actually stands." I could feel the attention shift in the room. Some people whispered. Others frowned. "He means well," Brennan continued with a chuckle. "But let's not confuse passion projects with sustainable growth. Lane Dynamics has real infrastructure, real contracts. We don't just install smart light switches. We shape futures." The slide disappeared. The silence was heavy. And then he smiled, the most smug, satisfied smile I'd seen in years. Like he thought he'd done it, proven his point, regained the spotlight. I waited 5 full seconds. Let the discomfort simmer. Then I stood. "May I respond?" I asked, not to Brennan, but to my father. He didn't answer. He looked uncertain, not defensive, not angry, just unsure. That alone was progress. Mr. Keaton, who'd been at brunch earlier, gestured slightly. "I think it's only fair." I stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, like I was stepping into a courtroom. "Brennan is right about one thing," I said. "I did start small. My first projects were solo. My first website looked like it was built by someone teaching themselves in the middle of the night, because it was." Some chuckles. "But what Brennan failed to mention," I continued, "is that the domain he just showed you hasn't been in use for 7 years. He went digging, not for the truth, but for anything that would fit the narrative he needed." I clicked the remote from the podium. A new slide appeared. A sleek, modern interface. My current company's homepage. Metrics. Testimonials. Logos from partners, including the international bank that backed my last funding round. "You can verify all of this," I said. "Everything's public. Contracts. Licensing. Even our upcoming expansion into Singapore." I don't say this to brag. I say this because legacy isn't built by pretending someone else is smaller. It's built by proving you can grow without needing to be told you're worthy. I turned to my father. "You've spent your whole life building something important. I respect that. But leadership isn't just about preserving a name. It's about adapting, evolving, seeing value in places you didn't expect." I stepped back. "And frankly, I'm not here to compete. I'm here to build something real, with or without applause." Silence. Then, slowly, a few people clapped. My father didn't. But he didn't stop them either. Brennan tried to recover, tried to move to the next topic. But the damage was done. His moment had turned into a mirror, one he hadn't expected to hold. That evening, while everyone gathered on the terrace for sunset photos and champagne toasts, I stayed inside, by the fire. Charlene sat with me, a small smile on her face. That was something, she said. I nodded. It's not over. Of course not, she replied. You just took the first piece off the board. Now watch what he does with the rest. She was right. I didn't expect Brennan to stay quiet after the summit room debacle. That would have required humility, a quality he never cultivated. What I didn't expect was how low he'd go trying to undo the blow to his ego. It started subtly, the way people like him always test the waters. A few days after we returned from the retreat, one of my longtime contractors forwarded me an email. Subject: concerns regarding Marcus Lane's licensing agreements. Sender: anonymous tip. The body of the message listed vague accusations, intellectual property misuse, exaggerated metrics, reputation red flags. It was transparent, amateurish, even. But the intention was clear: sabotage by suggestion. I didn't have to guess who was behind it. That same week, two potential partners in Zurich abruptly paused negotiations, citing pending clarifications. Another had already received a version of the same email, this one with an attached document marked confidential, containing nothing but poorly fabricated charts and distorted quotes from our website. When I traced the metadata, I found something I already suspected. It came from Brennan's assistant's device. I confronted him over a video call. He smiled like he was taking a customer satisfaction survey. I have no idea what you're talking about, he said smoothly. And even if I did, I'd imagine most companies would want to know who they're really working with. It's desperate, I said. And sloppy. You embarrassed me in front of Dad. I'm just leveling the field. I didn't say anything then. I just ended the call. Because I knew I didn't need to argue anymore. I had facts. I had proof. And I had something Brennan had never had to deal with. Real consequences. Over the next few weeks, I built a quiet case. Emails, timestamps, server logs, corroborated statements. I had my legal team assemble everything. Not to sue him, but to be ready if I needed to protect my business. I didn't want courtroom drama. I wanted finality. Then came the moment that ended everything, and oddly enough, it wasn't something I orchestrated. It was my father. 3 months after the retreat, Lane Dynamics hosted its annual shareholders banquet, a traditionally lavish affair where executives gave updates, financial reports were summarized, and Dad took the stage to assure everyone the company was thriving under Brennan's vision. This year, I wasn't invited. That's fine. I went anyway. Charlene had tipped me off that Brennan was planning to use the event to announce a collaborative acquisition of a smaller European tech company, one that bore a striking resemblance to mine. But the real kicker? He was planning to present one of my prototype models as his own. You read that right. He'd pulled the specs from an old mock-up I'd once shown Dad years ago, before I had refined and patented it, and rebranded it as Lane Sync, a proprietary innovation in automated infrastructure. So I walked into the event, calm, dressed simply, carrying nothing but a manila folder and a small device, my original prototype, marked with a patent ID and our company's embossed seal. As I stepped into the banquet hall, the speaker on stage was mid-sentence. With Lane Sync, we'll be entering a new era of connectivity. This is more than just a system, it's a way of thinking. It was Brennan. Polished, confident, deceptive. He hadn't seen me yet. I waited. He clicked the remote, revealing a glossy slide of the device, identical to mine, down to the outer casing design. He even used a name dangerously close to the code name I had archived. That was my cue. I stood. Voices hushed as I walked toward the front. Excuse me, I said evenly, but I believe there's been a mistake. Brennan's face dropped when he saw me. For the first time, he didn't have a quick line ready. He just stood there, frozen. I pulled out the prototype, held it up. This is my design. Patent 1118-943X. Filed under my company's name over 2 years ago. The design you see on the screen is a direct replica. Unauthorized. Misrepresented. The room went silent. Then I handed the folder to Mr. Keaton, Dad's old business partner and one of the longest-serving board members. Inside were all the legal filings, timestamps, and statements. Mr. Keaton flipped through them, then looked at Brennan. Is this true? Brennan stammered. I was told we had clearance. From who? I asked. Because it certainly wasn't from me. That was when my father stood. He walked toward me slowly, not with concern, but with suspicion. He took the prototype from my hand, inspected it, then looked at the presentation on the screen. When he turned back to Brennan, there was no anger in his face. Just disappointment. Cold, quiet disappointment. You didn't build this, he said flatly. Brennan's mouth opened and closed. Nothing came out. The board members whispered to each other. Haley turned pale. And then, without ceremony, my father made the only announcement he gave that night. There will be a full internal audit. Effective immediately, Brennan will step down from any product development responsibilities. The next week, Brennan was removed from his position. Quietly, but permanently. He wasn't fired. My father couldn't let the family name take that hit. But he was stripped of authority. He kept his title, sure. But titles mean nothing when you don't hold any keys. Haley left him 3 months later. According to Charlene, she said she didn't marry him to live in the shadow of his brother. As for my father, he never apologized, never asked for forgiveness. But he did call me one evening, late, just after the quarter ended. I reviewed the Zurich projections, he said. You've done well. I waited. That was all he said. Then he hung up. And honestly, that was enough. Because I didn't need his approval anymore. I never really did. I had built something real, not just a company, but a reputation, a legacy on my own terms. The kind that doesn't need a spotlight to shine. Now, Brennan works out of a much smaller office on the second floor of Lane Dynamics, far from the executive suite. His calendar is filled with minor internal meetings. No major decisions. No press releases. I still see him occasionally at family events. He barely makes eye contact. And my father? He's quieter now. Still composed, still rigid, but I think he understands, even if he'll never say it aloud. The Lane legacy didn't go to the son who asked for it. It went to the one who earned it. And no one can take that away from me. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments. If you like this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.